You are listening to When Therapists Watch TV, where we discuss today's buzzworthy TV shows and what they can teach us about ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Bly, licensed clinical psychologist at Ellie Mental Health. In season 2 of Ted Lasso, we are introduced to the concept of the Yips. Danny Rojas comes down with a case of the Yips, and that's what leads them to bring in Dr. Sharon. So I wanted to talk about the Yips. What are the Yips? We are obviously going to say it out loud here, even though they don't like to do that on the show. But I wanted to know, what causes that? Is that the same as choking? Is that what happened to Simone Biles at the Olympics? And what do you do if you get the Yips? Is that something that's fixable? I also wanted to take a look at coaching styles. Obviously, what Ted brings is, the people react to him and his coaching style like it's a little different than the norm. So is it different than the norm? Is this something that works? Or how does it compare to the more, severe kind of stereotypical professional ball coach who is angry and, yelling at his players? So that's what I want to talk about today. And to help me with that, I brought in two sportsy, therapist-y type guys who've done a lot of work with sports psychology, and so they're going to be here to help me understand all of this better. So my first guest is Ellie Kanan.
That's it.
Ellie, please remind me of your degree and a little bit about your background.
So I am currently a therapist at Ellie Mental Health. I am technically called a licensed professional clinical counselor. So I went to school at Ball State, got my graduate degree there in sports psychology and counseling. And so this particular season, I was really excited to actually spend time watching it, Ted Lasso's second season, because it really brought in the really important element of sports that tends to go unnoticed, the mental health element. And so we saw that instantly when the season began with, Sharon, the psychologist that they hired on. So I'm really glad to be here to be talking about a really important topic and
thanks. I'm
to be a
so
part of
excited
it here with you guys.
to be talking about this. Yeah. And then I'm bringing back.
Yep, I'm back.
Scott Cronenbush.
Couldn't get enough.
Cronenbush?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please tell me, got it right this time. Scott, remind us of your background.
Yeah,
and
so
maybe
Scott
include the sports
right?
psychology stuff.
Yep, great. So I've been at Ellie for 4 years. I'm like Ollie, I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor before Ellie. So been around the gauntlet in the psychology world, right? So I spent some time doing sports psych before coming to Ellie. Spent some time with program development before coming to Ellie, and then I'm also a coach, right? And so I think I really appreciate not just the show, but all the topics, and I think watching it from the therapist lens is real for all of us. Certainly, that's why we're here.
Totally.
But I can appreciate it from all those angles, absolutely. So.
Well, great. Well, I'm so excited that I'm genuinely, not just as a therapist, but also as a person.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to learn more about this, because as I was mentioning to you guys earlier, I think BB, I get something that's related to the Yips. So first, I was wondering if you guys could tell me where does that term come from? I don't even know if the Yips stand for something. I know literally nothing about that topic. So what can you guys tell me about the Yips, the history of that?
Sure.
Of that
You want to start?
concept,
Sure. So I spent a little time in Yips world, again in the sports psychology lens, almost 2 decades ago, right? In fact, 2 decades ago, right? But thinking back or drawing upon some of the research that I participated in, there's a couple different ways to look at the Yips. And so basically what we're focusing on is, when we look at sports, it's actually fine motor activity, right? So writing, musicians experience the phenomenon, athletes absolutely, and that's why we're here today. But basically there's a couple of different contexts with the Yips, right? So there's this concept called the dystonia, which is sort of a neurological experience that plays in the brain centers that are responsible for what's called a voluntary movement. So I want to throw something or I want to write something, I'm voluntarily doing that, right? Dystonia is where there's a response that's involuntary that impedes upon doing that activity, right? So now we're talking about golf. Golf is where Yips sort of got named,
Okay.
right? And that's,
Right.
Ollie might say more about that, but and the reason is because it tends to be the age range of 40 to 60 where we're maybe our athletic prowess is getting tested a little
Everything's
bit,
starts to fall apart.
Right.
And we can go to golf, right? Golf is a sport we all like, so that's sort of where it was recognized the most and where there's been the most research and attention, but it certainly shows up in all sports. So that's one facet of it could be like a neurological experience. It could be something we just don't know, right? It could be concussions, it could be from like substance, it could just be something we genetically inherited that shows up, okay? Then the play is, what's the psychology that goes with it, right? So like performance anxiety and those kinds of things. And they can be treated differently. So I heard you kind of shake out here, Terry, and you're kind of fishing a little bit, which is great for conversations. Like how do you fix it, right? Because that's the $1 million question, right? Like
So
how
are
do
you saying
there's
there's kind of sports anxiety or performance anxiety, and there's like the neurological piece, and they're not necessarily related.
They can and or can't be, right?
Okay,
So one could be,
but it's not,
hey,
it's not a given.
I don't feel stressed, but for some reason, this happens to me, right?
I would
And
say,
that kind of,
it's like a post-response. Like you start to develop
Yeah,
a sense
for sure.
of anxiety about, I don't know what's happening to my body.
Oh, so then you get anxious. You're seeing
Right.
you see that something's not working. Your body's doing stuff that you're not telling it to do, and
Right.
then you get anxious,
Right.
and now those things start to
Right.
maybe become like a vicious cycle or
Right.
kind of snowball from there.
Right, and so like if you think about if it's like a dystonia, again, that's a involuntary interruption to something voluntary. So if I'm kicking a ball, and I'm maybe not nervous, but for some reason it keeps going to the left, right? There's maybe something happening there. So the traditional method would be, let's work on technique and work with whatever it is that's going on that we don't even know maybe, right? But let's just re-grip, let's hold our instrument or whatever, let's tweak it, right? Then the stress part of it is, let's do some visualization, let's do some self-talk, so those two houses can live separate or together, right? It could be all of the above as well, so.
All right. So, and follow-up question, you said that you were in a study a long time ago at the Mayo, and you said it was about the Yips.
Yeah.
What was it looking at?
Yeah, so, okay, the curiosity was, and I gotta be careful, I can't overshare, but Golf World was talking with our sports psychology team there about running research to try and understand it better, and then thus training would come from there, right? So of the
Practicality
model,
of it.
Yeah, right. It was sort of like let's analyze heart rate. Let's look at grip of the putter. Let's look at all the things happening. Let's look at their eyes, how much they blink. Like let's just find everything, and find indicators for, is it a dystonia or are they stressed?
Right. Okay.
And so let's try and find that, right? And it's longitudinal, right? I mean, the Yips study, some of those that started way back then are absolutely still going, right?
Still
it's
part
just
of
the
it.
pool of research.
Wow.
Because there is this mystery, right?
There's a lot of unknowns. For
Is
sure.
the who gets it? Where is it coming from? And then how does it bleed into all walks of life, right? It could be performance. I know theater and stuff's part of the history, right? It fits in there too.
Oh, yeah.
We just don't call it Yips, right? Finding my mark and hitting the note, right? And preparing.
remembering your
right?
lines and all that.
Absolutely.
So, I'll ask
It's
this
a little
question.
scary to actually think about being a 40-year-old and having done like a repetitive, like automatic, really natural movement that you've learned over the years, and like out of nowhere, you feel kind of like despairing, and
your body starts
you're
betraying you.
so lost with like, what is it that's happening that I can't do? And so it can really leave an athlete feeling kind of alone in that experience. And they might try to overcompensate. They might try harder to outthink themselves, and that can really actually become a distraction. And so there's a sense of wanting to not lose that identity part of you too, right? So with golf, we've seen a lot of athletes who do, professional athletes who do develop the Yips. I don't really know about the term the Yips. I kind of like more of like something along the lines of like freezing or like getting stuck.
I mean, choking is another term that gets used, like you choke.
There's more of a psychological component to the choking, and has more to do with trying to be too in your head, too inward, and there's certainly other elements that come into play. Like if I'm someone who typically has the trait anxiety, and I haven't performed a skill before, if I'm a novice, it can make it more understandable for why someone would choke.
So like if we're looking at Danny Rojas, so that makes me think that kind of the way they're using the term in the show.
He's not really experiencing the Yips.
Yeah, I was going to say,
He's
what I'm
traumatized.
hearing is that this is something different. They're calling it the Yips, but obviously for him, it started after this very bad experience he had during a game, and suddenly he can't kick the ball anymore. But that, what I'm hearing is that is not necessarily the right term for it.
Dystonia. is
It's not a dystonia because it didn't come on.
right. It was a post.
It came on immediately, which is more, like I said, probably more of a trauma response.
Right.
Which is where we get in that world of like sports psychology, and granted you have a degree in it, right? And I've just dabbled in it, right?
So much.
But I'm
I
saying
still
like
wanna know.
that's where I get a lot of those questions about what does a sports psychologist do, right? And I think it houses all of it because in the episodes we can see a lot of it's relational kind of, and she does a lot of great listening, right? Then you also have sports psychologists that talk about visualization and walking me through the exercise and let's actually live in the experience, or let's go out on the field and do it, right? Or it could be technique. It's kind of all encompassing, right? So I love how it shakes out some of that. Let's talk about what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because that's part of that anxiety piece too, which can mean, we were talking right before we started officially recording.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that coaching element of even your strongest players, if you harp on them so much about, I'm a hockey guy, right? It's like, you got to catch the puck here and it has to leave the zone, right? Even the best skilled player, if you harp on that so much, it can make them sort of that paralysis when it's so easy, but it just impacts them in a negative way, and it'd be almost like a Yips response if we're going to Yips.
Coaches don't realize how much they can overload a player who's already naturally good at a certain skill that, like you said, performed over and over again. But in hockey, it's a fast-paced sport. And so I think there's an element of like, if we go back to the point that you made about inviting a sports psychologist and what they do, a lot of athletes, if they've never had anyone actually, encourage them to talk about, how their performance anxiety gets in the way of their day-to-day life or their actual performance, I can see them being hesitant and doubtful and unreally not bought in to someone like a sports psychologist. There's a lot of myths or misconceptions about what a sports psychologist does, and so that's why the psychological skills training comes in, and it's like, just give me something that will give me a quick fix, or that will help make me feel like there's a magic gimmick out there that will answer the question to the Yips.
And I think it speaks so much to the importance of the coach in this scenario.
Exactly.
I mean, first you need a coach who's willing to bring in a sports psychologist.
Danny bought in right away. The coach was like, just go see the psychologist.
And he did. I mean,
he was apprehensive.
Ted had to be talked into it, but the fact that, if he hadn't brought Dr. Sharon in, Danny may never have actually been able to get to the other side of that. And I was telling you guys that I was going to maybe bring up my own history, because I think that's part of what fascinates me about this. And when I was in high school, I played volleyball, and I was, that high potential, and I was doing Junior Olympics, and I was starting to get, I think it was at Junior Olympics when I started to, so we were at this tournament in Chicago, and it was this big deal, and it was a big game against another team anyway, and I just started to tank. And what my coach did was bench me. Never talked to me about it, never said, like, here's what's going on, just benched me. And then when we got back home, it was that constant, like, nobody ever helped me understand what was going on. It was just, you're gonna get benched. And I would get so frustrated with myself on the court, that would make it worse, and then I'd get benched. And because I never really had anyone help me understand what was going on, or how to, like, get out of my own head, it just, like, it kind of spiraled into this, like, it was awful, so I quit, right? Because I was not enjoying myself anymore. And so I'm wondering, like, what factors into somebody being, if we were talking about the Yips as a neurological, that's more that kind of 40 to 60, something's going on there. But for athletes who are still in their prime, teens, 20s, even early 30s, what's that relationship between, like, kind of personality type, or what are the factors that go into somebody more likely to choke like Danny did, to get into that place where, like, they're so up in their head that they can't do the thing that they technically know how to do?
Yeah, it's like that optimal stress bell curve, right? The concept of you have to have stress to perform.
Yeah.
And then it comes down to that coaching again, is, who's sort of wired that they actually become more calm the heavier the gravity.
Right.
And you can find that. Right?
Simplistic.
Simplistic thinking.
Small little tiny keys.
Exactly, right? So, I appreciate that example a lot. I think I know that feeling, right? Of just like, that what's happening and that uncertainty.
And, like, so I'm just going to try harder. I just got to, like, try more, or I just got to do better, and I just got to be really mad at myself because I'm going to just, like,
demanding perfection.
Yeah, demand perfection because I need that, and that's what they're telling me I need to do.
Yeah, many athletes, regardless of what level you are, but especially as you reach higher competitive elite status, there's high expectations. There's an assumption that you're going to continuously perform at a high level, and you base your sense of self-worth on achievement, and you need that constant validation, not from the coach, but from yourself. It would be nice to get it from the coach, when they actually continue to invest in you and not automatically assume that this is going to, you having one slump automatically concludes, I should bench you. And so your coach just struggled to have a sense of curiosity. I'm sorry you ended up quitting.
Okay. It's unfortunate, but like I guess what I'm wondering is
the arousal piece.
The
that he
interaction between the player and the coach, and
it's Scotty. Yeah.
And then bringing in even recommending. I mean, this was late 80s.
Yeah.
Nobody was recommending therapy for anything.
Right.
But
well, Ted tried in the show, didn't he?
He did try. I feel like he was really trying to be responsive in a good
normalizing
way
it
and be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So have you guys ever, Ollie, have you done work with, or either of you, with athletes who are struggling with kind of what Danny was going through? Just where they're elite player who suddenly can't do the thing.
I have not actually worked with a player who has gone through that, but I want to say the point that you made about I don't know, the arousal piece, that there's an element of how do we help the athlete sit with the discomfort that comes with making a mistake, or be able to actually turn their attention to what actually can be controlled about the task. In this case, the PK or the corner kick. And so part of me wants to say that Ted was secretly a sports psychologist himself. And so, with him trying to get Danny to normalize his experience and say that was something that you can have prepared for. All of that was aimed at trying to help Danny return to a state or reestablish a place where he can actually take in the reality of what's happening, which is, there's a next play coming. You're going to have another chance sooner than later to correct the experience. And that didn't really work.
It's kind of decatastrophizing it,
putting it in the context.
You can this was one thing.
But Danny's personality would suggest that he's someone who really cares about life, right? Football is life.
Yeah.
He kept saying that. And so there's this element of everyone reacts to failures. There's a uniqueness to each player. They have different reactions, and how long those reactions stay, perpetuated or going. Keep them going is going to be dependent on how they interpret or, make sense of the experience. And
so for him, it was that typical. It was the particular way that things went wrong, that it killed an animal.
Yeah, that's an exaggerated.
It wasn't losing the game. He'd been through he'd
devastating
obviously
moment.
been able to lose games and be fine. So it's not that he had to win or play perfect. It was this particular type of imperfection.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That
he's really giddy, so maybe his anxiety presents as really wild and high-spirited, and so that could be his anxiety reversed if he has that trait. But there's also the element of they're professionals, so it's expected that they've spent years and years of acquiring a really simple skill, like kicking a penalty. That's not really easy, though. It's a really pressure cook situation, and so I'd be in my head about it. And
so that's the question. I want to maybe, Scott, direct this at you perhaps. I'm thinking, or actually both of you, I'm thinking about perfectionism. To be an elite athlete,
definitely quality.
You have to have some level of perfectionism. You have to keep driving yourself, pushing yourself, overcoming pain to, and adversity to make yourself better, and you've got to keep driving yourself. A lot of times, a lot of sports, it's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's, even when your friends are going to a party, you've got a practice or a game. There's got to be such a pretty high level of that drive and perfectionism to do this, and yet I'm guessing there's either a flavor of perfectionism or a point at which the perfectionism actually gets in the way. Is there anything that you guys know about that relationship between perfectionism and choking or the yips or whatever? Scott, are you?
Yeah. Well, I think coaching teams right now, I absolutely I think that's a driver, right? And we might not call it perfectionism, just, you know, in a team sport, especially, I can kind of see it's like living up and doing it for the team, right? Not wanting to let the team down. And execution is like, where does failure fit into a successful story in the narrative, right? That kind of thing. But I agree with you, because your bigger question is, to be in sport or performance, arts, you name it, or a writer, there's a drive to do something special, right? Or to be part of something, right? And individuals...
And to rise above.
Yeah, to rise above, fantastic.
The masses of people who are also doing that thing.
Exactly, right? And at any given minute, you know, I always joke with my team, like, hey, there's 2 good teams here today for this competition. We should expect both teams are gonna score, right? Like, let's just get that in our head right now, right? Like, failure is part of our successful story, right? A part of our journey. Because to your point, I think you're hitting on is, something drives us to sort of perform, and that might be that perfection, we call it perfection, but maybe it's called something else, but this, to be part of something, right? And to succeed and overcome.
To succeed,
right?
To keep pushing
Progress,
yourself to
move
succeed,
forward and make progress.
But then you have the high competitive, so like, then what do you do with that? Right?
And when does it get in the way? That same thing that was maybe key to your success, when does it turn against you?
And I think the coach plays into that.
Okay.
You know, I spend a lot of time, you know, I feel really good about the coaching side of it and my experience as a player, and presently spending the last couple of years doing a lot of connections with coaches for mentorship. So I'm seeing all the different angles, right? Different levels, right? And I think one of the appreciations I have here is stuff that's shaken itself out of, it's not about, I think the best coaches that I'm seeing when it comes to yips and stress response is those who understand that it's not about what they feel, it's about what the player feels. And that's what was missing in your example, right? Is where's the connection of, even if it was to protect you and kind of pull you out, if you didn't know.
It felt very punitive.
Yeah, you didn't know, and it could have been, right?
Yeah, it felt like you're bringing the team down with your, you know, your attitude and you're messing up, so we're just benching you. It felt very punitive.
Right. And I think there's in the sports psych, and I've certainly seen it, maybe you can speak to it, is I've seen the shift in the coaching for sure, because people just, we have to attend to people a little differently now. And I think coaches, right or wrong, that's just the thing, coach the way they were coached, just like people maybe parent the way they were parented. And we think about the 80s and even the 90s, and I think about, you know, college and experiences myself. I'm like, yeah, I could absolutely see the hard-nosed coach side of it. But the nuance that I see in sport at the highest levels especially are an understanding and appreciation that it's not about what the coach feels, it's more about what the player feels. And then as a group, that uniformity helps get to that perfection, execution. And I think the worst coaches are, you know, maybe on the screaming side of it, let's just go with that example, are maybe they're feeling a pressure to make all their teams good at everything, but the identity doesn't allow that, right? So I could never be in the Super Bowl the other night when the guy was gonna kick a chip shot field goal. My legs would have turned to spaghetti. You know,
I think about that every time I see those like high stakes, single motion things. I think, oh hell no!
Right.
Like,
so
I
mean,
could never.
It's that. Yeah,
never
exactly.
do that.
So it's that performance. We're drawn to it because there's something about like execution and succeeding, perfection, getting there. And then when it falls off, is wanting to do all of it, be great at all of it, not tolerate challenges or stress. Then the vulnerability, you know, the screaming and loud.
Especially if you don't
So
talk
maybe
about
it's how
it.
you understand your mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
So just like trauma,
For
is
sure.
how you come to understand the bad things that happen to you that kind of makes or breaks what
Be a
happens
goldfish.
next.
Be a goldfish.
Be a goldfish and being able to be.
Well, and you
just-
talked about it earlier. He said control the controllables. Sorry, I
No, it's okay.
there.
So being a goldfish can be really hard for some people.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, sorry, what
For
were you
sure.
saying?
No, I think it goes right with that, right? Just control the controllables. Like, I have to move goldfish.
Right.
I have to go to the next thing, right? And I'm good with that. Like, here we go.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think when we think of control the controllables, we think, well, I'm in control of my body.
Yeah.
So I'm in control of
Yeah.
what I do when the ball comes my way. So I just need to control it better. But I think for someone like me, the opposite happens. And like I was telling you guys, I just started playing pickleball. Like, I mean, it's a rule. If you're over 45, it's a rule now. You have to play pickleball, or they just kick you out of middle age. And so I started playing. I took one lesson. It was going really well. Like, my husband and I were like asked to volunteer to like demonstrate stuff. So I was feeling real good about myself. I was like, I got this. So I go to an open pickleball at the local gym, and the guy I'm playing with is super competitive. Like, he's there every day, and he's like, whatever. And so I started playing and I make a mistake and he immediately starts coaching me. Oh, you got to do this. Oh, you got to hold it this way. Oh, you got to step into this. And the more he was doing that, the more I was just, because I was like, I just got to control. I'm missing the ball entirely. Okay, I just got to control this. I just got to like calm myself down and get, and the more I tried to do that, the worse it got. And then the more he was coaching me, and then the worse I got. And I didn't know how to get myself out of that. And it was the weirdest thing because I'm like, this is freaking pickleball. And I'm back into those same dynamics. It's like I was 15 again, playing volleyball with a coach threatening to bench me. Like it was the weirdest, it was kind of surreal of like, bam, being right back at that. And when I was listening to you guys talk about like the way the coach handles it, or like when they get you so up in your head, because they're just like hitting you with all these different things that it's too much and the athlete gets overwhelmed, they like can't. And that's exactly what happened. So it's fascinating to me that this is just this thing that we don't really, I don't know, I feel like it should get talked about.
Yeah,
we
right.
just
happens
talked about to me more.
It happens with my clients too when I'm coaching them, and I get in my head about like, am I overwhelming them with their working memory is just like taxed out. And so they have to try harder, and if they try harder, if it's a novice skill, you know, I'm talking about like movements that are extremely complex. Like pickleball, maybe.
It's not. That's what made it so frustrating. It's not complex. It's so really straightforward.
So that's not necessarily your fault. It's just your brain's way of trying to make up for that difference of not being able to actually respond to the demands of the situation here.
I think it's my brain trying to like will me into playing better, even though it literally never works.
Backfires,
So with Simone Biles, you know, we saw a very public example of something happening. I mean, it was the Olympics, so that's stressful. But then she was describing it as like suddenly just her sense of direction just left her. But something happened there. So in your, like, I'm not asking you guys to diagnose, but from what you saw or heard of that, assuming you heard about that at all, is that the yips? Is that more of a psychological thing? Like, or is it a combination of both? Like, what happened there?
I mean, she's on a national or international like podium, right? And the demands of the position that she's in are extremely high, and has a history of success performing those really I don't know what you want to call them. I don't know exact terms with gymnastics, but
she was killing it.
She's killing it, like she always has. And so, you know, to have her make one mistake that seemingly like plagued her career has more to do with, you know, the kind of, like you said, the pressure that we put on these really high elite athletes.
They call it the twisties. Like there's
that's
a
what
name
I've heard.
for it.
That's what I've heard, and that's another name for the yips too. And one thing I really love about what she did was she took a break. She said, "I'm not going to continue participating." She didn't stay afterwards and continue, you know, putting her body through the different pre-routines or pre-performance routines that she has. And you know, she tried to use her voice to normalize and kind of bring light to the fact that this isn't something that she's not the only one who's experienced it in her sport, and won't be the last to either.
What was your understanding of? I mean, did you watch that? Did you see?
Yeah, I'm not recalling all of it right now, but I'm familiar, and I did. But I think what I appreciated was it represented a bit of a level setting because she's back now, right? And she's a champion on all kinds of levels, personal and professional, right? And she's killing it, right? And you know, there is that acknowledgement of, hey, there's something here, right? And I need to admit, whether it be sports psych or just a time away, like burnout playing in and distracting, right? And that kind of thing. So I appreciated the level set, and I think it's in the show too on a lot of different levels where's level setting happening, right? Like, hey, well, let's just simplify this. It's just this, right? And even that is a little dangerous too, because you can oversimplify too, and then we're too calm, right? But I think I did appreciate that, hey, I looked at it kind of like a level set. She took a break. Twisties, yips, whatever you want to go with. I think they're all a marriage of I'm performing individual and team in gymnastics. You're doing an individual with all eyes on you alone. And it's
pressure
for the whole team. And there we're back to the goal kick, right? Of I'm alone. We're no longer passing it. We're alone here. But the whole team's impacted by what happens here, right? And so I think those moments are just high level, right? And That's why they're Olympics, and that's why they're on the grand stage of they've been able to manage it their whole life. And I think it probably did a lot for athletes across the globe to see, wow, this isn't just me, right? The best of the best. And so I appreciate it from that side for sure.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is, she'd been under high pressure competitive situations, and it's almost like she just hit a breaking point. Was there just like something that you get to a place where your brain just can't compartmentalize anymore, or it can't, the stuff you were using, the self-talk or whatever, the skills you were using, to not be overwhelmed by that. It's almost like to perform at that level, you can't be truly aware of everything that's happening, because if you were fully aware of the stage that you're on, of the number of people watching you, of what's at stake, of the careers and the money and whatever all involved depending on the sport you're playing, if you were fully taking all of that in, I don't think most of us could then like play the game well. So there's got to be I've got to think some of this is being able to compartmentalize that, and then what is part of what happens is you just can't anymore. I don't know, is there just it just gets to be too much? I mean, what would be a theory as to why someone like Simone Biles or other professional athlete can perform under pressure for so long and then suddenly can't? I mean, are there things that you know about that can be the tipping point?
I'm sure there are things I can't call terms, and I haven't spent time in the sports psych world as often as I could do, whatever. But what I would say is, like, there's an element of normalization there too, right? Of, even nowadays, if you watch any sport, maybe the NBA, just because I just saw the other night, right? Like, there's just guys taking the night off, right? It's not that they have to or that there's something wrong, but like maybe there's some execution that's been teased out of rest is an indicator for longevity too, right? Especially now when sports are year round, right? And your body needs more tests, right? And so that's more than ever before. When we were in the 90s and 80s or whatever it is, the sports still had seasons there, and nowadays there's just new elements that factor in, and so maybe, right?
So that's interesting. So do you think, if you had to guess, do you think that with kids, and kids are just under more pressure now, right? Sports are year-round. They get they're highly competitive by the time. And I had a client tell me that their kid had been recruited to play on an elite traveling flag football team, and this child was 5. And so when we have kids being recruited to play on elite teams that are year-round, starting in kindergarten, are we going to see an increase in this sort of thing, where the pressure starts young, it's year-round, there's no necessarily a break from it, the stakes get high ridiculously early in their lives? Are we going to maybe see more of that then? Where they just burn out, they just it gets to them, they can't cope with the stress?
The public image is so high at an early age, and you're supposed to maintain it in every single high stakes scenario, and if you don't, people conclude that's once you deviate from what you're expected to perform. I mean, that's not really fair for the athlete, but it's up to the athlete to be able to decide, what are my actual standards and expectations, and if I don't meet those, can I, have supports in my life, resources that don't just involve my identity being wrapped up in being an athlete. But there's also that feeling of like, I want to make everyone proud, and like that's how I get my love from people, right? Trying to make dad and mom.
Which raises the stakes even more, right? That's an additional layer of pressure.
So it's up to the adults to realize, like, encourage them to excel and try to, the coaches, the parents, who are equally vested in their development as athletes, and hopefully, they get a chance to decide what kind of path they want to take at some point. That's my bias, of course. But I wanted to be an NFL player. I wanted to kick, penalty kicks, and then I don't know if it would be for the U.S. team, but so there's always dreams, but putting in perspective, like there's multiple commitments that they can pursue, keeps them grounded from obsessing about a certain outcome. I have to always be doing and performing at a high level.
So, and you're a coach, Scott, for hockey, right? What do you notice with kids? How old are the kids that you coach?
Well, right now they're 8th and 9th grade, so they're in that high school, going through puberty, heavy.
You don't talk to them like Roy talks, like,
Yeah, right. No,
If you're swearing at him.
yeah, right. No, but so there's a couple of things I'm thinking about on your question about starting early, right? Is I think that a lot of the stress can be parent brought, right? Because they're maybe talking to athletes throughout whatever age range it is, and they're coaching because it's how they feel, right? So we're back to it's not how you feel, it's how the player feels, right? So they're coaching and doing a lot of analysis with parent eye, and coaches do the same thing with coaching eyes, and it tends to be most often, I should say, I don't know what percentage, but it's often what that adult's or that coach's perspective is. It's what they feel is coming in the conversation. So now it's pedestalized, whatever it is, the errors or the successes, it's sort of under this spotlight. And a lot of players can absolutely handle that, but I don't know that the majority, I think that, it just elevates the stress a little bit, right? Then when it comes to peak performers, I think certainly at this age, it's shaking out who is and who isn't, right? I mean, there's still time, don't get me wrong, but there's just kids that they just don't get frazzled by it, right? They're just wired that way.
So there's just something about temperament too.
And you can develop that, that resilience and that strength and that
tenacity.
Tenacity, right?
But those are the ones that get the rewards from the coach, and
absolutely.
I get chosen by the A team versus the B team, and so you do develop a sense of confidence, and that confidence doesn't get easily shaken over time until you meet a coach who, actually cares about who you are beyond, what you do for them.
Ted does that, right? Like I think that's a great job of
the quintessential coach.
It goes back to a conversation we had in this basement not long ago about like the positivity side of it.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of where I was, Terry, like stuck is what we're talking about here. He absolutely feels the loss and anger when it comes to the sports side of it. I know there's other tentacles to it, but I love it that there's this, but you feel dejected. I got to figure out how to make you feel like comfortable here and
not
part
alone.
of something, not alone, right? And you know what I mean? So I think that I really like that side of it.
So is his coaching style, would you say, is there a philosophy behind it? Is this a type of, identified type of coaching that he embodies? Or is this really is he going off script here as a coach?
He's like a Carl Rogers mixed with Dumbledore and a little bit of like the, no, but seriously,
is that an official
he
style,
does have a
Dumbledore coaching?
I would say he's definitely more humanistic and positive psychology vibes, always trying to send the message that I care more about who you are as a person than what it is you do for me.
And is that intentional? Is that something that coaches?
Yeah, to make them the best version of themselves, you have to actually believe in them. Yeah.
I think so. It's a practice.
It is a practice. So there are coaches who intentionally choose to be more because we never see those coaches.
There's no correlation there, though, there is maybe a correlation between the types of coaches and those who win a lot. Yeah. But if winning is number one, you can still be hard-headed and, get off on punishing your athletes and trying to be the dominant force in their lives. But that's the kind of coach I had growing up in high school, and we did win a lot.
Yeah.
Because he knew how to pick his favorite players and build a team around them. But I can guarantee you right now, the things that he said to me stay with me that were really negatively impactful on my identity too. And
right. So those styles can result in winning or peak performance, but the cost to the players maybe is different.
Yeah.
Was there so here's my sports knowledge is minimal, but wasn't there was it a Lakers coach who was known for being really positive and about the health of the players?
Super cerebral and very naturalistic.
But Jackson, he was I felt like he was considered to be kind of an outlier. The ones we knew about were the ones who were throwing the chairs on the sidelines.
Bob Knight,
and then so this guy, Phil Jackson, was kind of this ooh, what's he doing? Because this is different. Is he teaching his...
Michael Jordan.
Tough, easy to be relaxed with those performers. Well, and remember too here, it's kind of like choosing school too, right? Or where you go to an institution or, whatever. It's sort of I really am drawn to, because there are those people who are I need that.
I need somebody to yell at me?
Right? And I know that sounds goofy, right? But there's some of that are just tough love. Right, and they're just that's where I'm at. I really like that piece. They're going to hold me in line and hold me accountable, and I like that, right? And then there's others that maybe you're jumping around, and I think about like some coaches that do that, right? And then there's the middle, right? And it is that what brings me in, and it's kind of nice to know that it both exists, right? To say like there's a place for everybody. If you are really ultra competitive and you need that coach who's gonna feel that with you, then you've got those options, right? And if you need someone who's just gonna sort of be there with you, and there's those options too. But there's certainly theories behind, for sure.
I know Ted's a fictional character, but that's one thing that was one of his strengths, was that he knew how to utilize the strengths of other coaches. And so he pulled in Roy, he pulled in Nate, and Roy was able to speak to Isaac and
Roy, who
him.
took that more like kind of keep him in line, nobody.
Yeah, so he had an accurate assessment of himself as a coach and what he can do to reach his players. But the point that you made about having, I think we call that like empathy or capacity to be adaptive and in terms of understanding like what moves and drives and touches a player. And I definitely needed someone to tell me what to do. And I still do. I still need someone to tell me how to finish my documentation.
So, fair, same. So if you've got a kid who wants to be an athlete and they're showing some inclination towards athletics, how do you as a parent help your kid understand what kind of coaching style they respond best with? Like, I'm going back in that time machine and thinking, damn it, if I had just, I wish somebody had like told me there are different ways of coaching that might work better for you. So what can parents do if how do they know? Like, how do you know what kind of style your kid is going to respond to? Or what do you do if you feel like there isn't a good match between your kid and their coach? Because no one wants to be, not no one. I don't want to be that parent who's blaming the coach for my kid's performance. But I also would want, if my kids were athletic, I would want to connect them with a coach that wouldn't cause the kind of damage you and I are talking about, where we had the wrong coach for us. At least I did. I'm not going to speak for you, but I definitely did. And it ended my, volleyball, whatever that was going to be, definitely got cut short. So how do you know? Like, what are some signs? Is it if your kid is choking? Like, is that a good sign that maybe they've got the wrong match? If they were performing well and then they get this coach and now they're tanking? Or what else would you be looking for?
Well, youth sports,
I can't answer that question.
You just don't have the coach volume, right? You kind of have who you have. Right? And there's, some places are blessed with lots of volunteers, and it shakes itself out a little bit. But I don't know. I think it's, again, how do you help someone persevere with the circumstance, right? That if they land on a coach who's just a little more serious, then just what can we do there, right? And what are the facets to work through it? I don't know if performance is always. I think that's an easy one for friends and family to kind of is an indicator. Like, the coach is responsible for my kids being motivated.
And that's what I don't want it to become that either. But if there is, there can be if it's important to have the right kind of style of coaching to really bring out your abilities the best, and help you understand when you make mistakes, understand it in a helpful way. Trying to find that balance, right? Again, you don't want it to be the coach's fault, and you don't want your kid to get like, or your college student or your young adult to get super discouraged and think they've just lost their skill, they're just done because they can't play anymore, when maybe there's more that they could be doing that involves like finding a different coach. I don't know. Just teaching them how to work
the player
through
is supposed to adapt to the coach. The coach doesn't. That's kind of one of the main stereotypes. And so like, that's why it takes a really flexible coach who can model being a teacher, being a coach, being a parent, has those qualities of actually wanting to align by using their mannerism, their own skills, their own like tactics of reaching the player. And you can't reach every single parent as a coach. It's impossible, right? And that's not the kind of pressure you want to put on yourself. You do want to show up authentically as yourself. And then if parents have questions, and they will, they'll ask you some really hard questions, and they're maybe not.
Or maybe this is where a therapist with that kind of experience comes in handy. Maybe instead of trying to switch coaches, you take your kid to a therapist who's experienced in this and can help them understand in a healthy way their variations in how they're playing.
Well, I think, Ted, if I were to tie it to it, you're hitting on it all and just triggering all these things, right? And it's like maybe as a parent, since that's a question of, hey, Scott had this coach previously to the new coach and
Historically, yeah.
really thrived on this kind of feedback, right? And like allowing the coach to still be authentic and know.
Right.
So like, what do I do with what I know when I know it, right? Because there is a point of not knowing, but you start to know, right? And then it is left in the hands of the coach to be like, what will you do with that information? And if it comes to performance, then there should be a driver, right? If Scott needs me to do a little more of this, as a coach knowing that, now I'm on the hook, right? What am I going to do with that information? And so
What are the ages that you work with?
So 8th and 9th grade now,
So you have to explain to parents why their kids aren't starting sometimes, and
all the time.
and then when you do, you're not trying to make them feel better, or you're just trying to tell them how it is maybe, and this is about the team, which is maybe something Ted struggled with, which is, you know, you there's that element of loyalty to your athletes, and that I want to be able to give you opportunities to succeed, but I also have a job at the end of the day, which is to make a team here that has the chance to outperform other teams. And outside of the field, we can have really great relationships. Is that okay with you? And we'll define your role, you know, on the team.
Yeah.
And if your parents may not want to hear that, because they're like, but I had a history of being successful as an athlete, or I'm spending all this money.
We could do a whole hour just on dealing with parents and
that's a really vast
sports.
topic.
It's a whole topic
Parents
right
just
in and
stay
of
out of it,
itself.
but
One, it fits. I think this is such a good topic because if there's a draw that can come out of Ted on this is Yips is and performance is an everybody topic.
Yeah.
Not just it's a fine motor action, job performance, speaking, music, theater. Right? We can all relate to it. And so a little talk about it is like it makes more sense, right? When you go, it's all the things.
It's interactive. It's all the different facets in a person's life are going to come together and affect how they show up at whatever they're doing, they're performing at, job, sports, arts, whatever. All these things are going to come together, and the people that are giving them feedback is going to go a long ways in help in kind of determining where they go on that path, how they overcome those obstacles. And that, ding ding, they're always therapists they can go to too, who might be able to add to that understanding and really help people understand it in a workable, helpful way rather than a I suck kind of way. Because I do think that's, for perfectionists like myself, it's really easy to go that direction. So I really appreciate this conversation. This has been, so, like all of these, I feel like I could talk for forever, and I really, this one was, I feel like I learned more in this one than I anticipated. So thank you guys both.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great.
Have you back again sometime.
Please.
This episode of When Therapists Watch TV was produced by Ellie Mental Health. Miranda Barker is the managing producer. Jesse Stenbroughton is the technical director. Our production team also includes Julia Galloway, Lucas Mooney, and Tu Pham. A special thanks to Lucas Fellini, Nick Seeger, and Mel Springer. I'm Dr. Terry Bly. Thanks for listening.